I've been like a MacGyver, putting myself back together. Piecing myself back together over here. I was burned out physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and I just cried on the phone. I just got really real with them. And I said, I need help.
Welcome to Real Human Stories, where we talk to people about mental health journeys that you don't usually hear about. Our guest on today's episode is Rose. She has been through just about every layer of struggle, from severe trauma and dissociation to burnout, homelessness, and years of feeling misunderstood by the system that was supposed to help. But what makes her story unique isn't just what she went through, but how she found her way out. Through a combination of therapy, self-discovery, and unconventional paths, she describes reaching a level of healing and nervous system regulation that she never thought was possible. This is her story. So thank you so much, Rose, for joining me today. I am so excited that you reached out. Your journey has not been an easy one, and along the way, you have had to explore and find solutions that just weren't really there for you.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I've been like a MacGyver, putting myself back together. Piecing myself back together over here.
I mean, I don't know where to start with your journey. I feel like we can start in so many different places.
Well, growing up, mental health was heavily stigmatized. I watched a lot of people in my family struggle intensely and just be kind of like stigmatized and like demonized. And so I was really afraid of being mentally unwell. And so I had to hide it a lot. So when I got into my early 20s, I started to really struggle. I moved out of my parents' home and my nervous system started to know safety, and that got overwhelming. So I started to really kind of come unglued, and I was really dysfunctional, and I was having a hard time keeping jobs. I got married in my early 20s. I got to a point where I just couldn't keep living the way that I was living. And nobody around me could seem to recognize how much I was struggling. Nobody was telling me what I needed to hear. I was just like in so much pain all the time. I was having meltdowns all day, every day, and I didn't know they were meltdowns because I didn't know I was autistic. I thought I was having panic attacks. And there just came this moment where something within me, call it the higher self if you will, said, nobody's going to tell you what you need to hear. You're going to have to do it for yourself. And so I made the choice to start going to get mental health care. You know, I was really scared because of the things I witnessed growing up and the way that it was talked about, but I had absolutely no other choice. I couldn't keep living the way I was living, and I didn't want to not live. I tried that once when I was 15 and it didn't work. And I just wasn't going to go there again.
Yeah, that's so hard, and I appreciate you sharing that. ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, you experienced all 10 of those.
It was really intense growing up. I was the youngest in my family. Both of my parents had first marriages, and both of them had children from their first marriages. You know, we had our basic needs met, but there was so much going on all the time. My one sister was severely mentally ill in a way that made her unsafe and volatile. And my other sister was really good at playing good person. And she was epileptic as well. And so, even from a young age, when I was 4 years old, and she was watching me, I had to know how to take care of her if she had a seizure. So, like 4 years old, I'm the one who has to know how to like call 911 and do all this stuff in the event of that happening. It was just like chronic stress all the time and a lot of chaos and a lot of volatility and like emotional instability. And I was made to be responsible for all of them. The more ACEs you have, like the more statistically likely you are to experience like certain terrible life outcomes. You know, I had the odds stacked all the way against me, but something within me was determined to figure out how to do better. I enrolled in community college and I just started out taking a couple classes. I went to UCLA. I studied psychology. I minored in anthropology, and I just continued to learn and understand how people work. I was burned out physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I was so burned out. And so I left school and I became homeless for a period of time. I was homeless with my kid and my mom for a summer. And I spent a lot of time in severe burnout, feeling the weight of everything, the collapse. And I was severely dysregulated. And it was at this time, while I was navigating these things, it was right around early 2018, I was trying to understand my own inner experience. And because I lacked resources, I was trying to think like a scientist. I was trying to, use my UCLA education to think, how could I think more scientifically about this? And I started to consider maybe this is something more like a personality disorder because I was becoming very aware of just how traumatized I was. And I was like, maybe going through all of that intense stuff really had a deeper effect on me. Maybe this is a personality disorder. So I started researching BPD, borderline personality disorder. And I wasn't trying to diagnose myself. I was just trying to see if something could make sense of my experience. Okay. And I was just consuming information for weeks about this. So I started seeing this one therapist and she was open to talking about it. She was like, "Oh, I actually know a lot about BPD and da 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 da. Da, and yeah, like we can totally explore that." Well, by week 3 or 4 of me reading like everything known to man about borderline personality disorder, I came across an article that talked about how high functioning women with autism are commonly misdiagnosed with all of these things, including ADHD, including BPD, including mood disorders, including OCD. And I was like, hmm, that's really interesting. The more I was reading about this, the more it was really kind of checking every box for me. And it was blowing my mind. I was like, wow, like this makes so much more sense than just like borderline by itself. And so I went to that same therapist. And when I told her, I said, hey, this is what I came across. And now this is what I'm reading. And this is actually making a lot more sense to me. And she was like, I don't know. Like she got really weird about it. And that was a flag for me because I need you as a healthcare provider to be scientific minded, to be willing to consider these things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's so interesting. Because why would she react that way? I'm so curious.
it's the lack of understanding. I mean, the way that autism is presented academically and even medically or clinically, just not really giving the full picture from my perspective. And a lot of mental health clinicians don't have specialized training in autism. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it's not probably a standard part of their training. That became a journey for me. So from 2018 to 2020, I spent going through different healthcare providers trying to find somebody who would hold space for me. And it was actually kind of like a traumatic experience because the way that providers talked to me was so disturbing. I went to one psychiatrist, and within 15 minutes of talking to me, she was ready to diagnose and treat me for bipolar disorder. I had been evaluated many times for bipolar disorder and it had been ruled out. I got to a point where I could no longer handle the stress of trying to navigate finding a provider. And so I just called my insurance company. I say I gave it to God and I just cried on the phone. And I didn't mean to, but I did. I just got very vulnerable and I said, hey, I'm having a really hard time. I'm really struggling. I'm really trying to find a mental health care provider who can help me understand whether or not I might have autism or something more serious. I just got really real with them. And I said, I need help. I don't know how to navigate this by myself. I'm not getting calls back. People aren't taking new patients. People don't want to have the conversation with me. And they set me up with a woman who was what's called a patient care coordinator. And so this is another thing that I think people really need to know is that insurance companies can have patient care coordinators. And this woman did it all for me. She started finding providers. She started calling the offices. She said, I don't know what it is, but when we call from the insurance company, we get different results. And so that's when I was led to a therapist who actually was really helpful. And so this therapist I started seeing was the first therapist to really hold space for me and say, okay, she said, well, I don't really know a lot about autism, but we can figure it out together. I'll hold space for you while you figure this out for yourself. And that was like life saving for me to just have someone like hold that space for me and just not like shut me down immediately and tell me like, well, you don't look autistic. Like obviously I've been masking my whole life and you can't tell by looking at somebody if they have autism, it turns out. You know what I mean? And then I was able to then escalate it to a neuropsychologist. And neuropsychologists are the ones who really have the training in neurodevelopmental disorders. like autism and ADHD. And that's when I was given my autism diagnosis. So that was in 2020. It was really a journey. I had to really fight for it.
So what did that do for you? You know, you're on this journey and like once you finally had this diagnosis and you had a reasonable amount of confidence, how did that impact the rest of your journey?
Well, I mean, it was very liberating and it was very healing. It also came with its own grief journey because you start to grieve how things could have been if you had known sooner. It allowed me to really change the story I had been telling myself about my struggles.
My mind is blown honestly because this exemplifies resilience. Most people would have given up like so many times before. There's a lot of facets to the story,
Right.
but the key takeaway is for you to hit every single wall through this journey. Everything was stacked against you. I mean, it really was. And what was it? What was it?
What gave me resilience? Well, I'll tell you something. It was certain people along the path who validated my experiences. That gave me something to hold on to. So while I was navigating all of that, while I was dealing with all of the dysfunctional mental health providers, and I say that with love, okay, I was reintroduced to psilocybin. And so I started reading more about psilocybin as plant medicine. 2A, I might be butchering this, but it's the serotonin 2A receptors, which expands your kind of like conscious awareness and your overall sense of well being and your kind of sensory perception. But it also does something called bypassing the default mode network. And the default mode network is part of like your neural wiring that tells you like the story of who you are. So, what the psilocybin allowed me to do was start to bypass those dissociative barriers, to reconnect with those parts of myself, to start to process what those parts of myself had been holding as far as like repressed emotion and traumatized, memories. Having that diagnosis like gave me permission. Now, did I need the diagnosis? Could I have done this without the diagnosis? Probably. It might have taken longer. Sure. But whatever it was, it helped me. And so I started being more accommodating to myself. And then by 2023, I was facing a crossroads between staying in that situation and helping my mother or getting my child and I out of that situation and letting my mom take care of herself. As soon as I made that decision to choose myself, it was like magic. I received a letter in the mail that I was offered an application for Section 8 housing, and it got approved within a couple months. And so we were able to move out on our own. And that allowed me to continue doing the healing because now I was out of an environment where my nervous system was being activated a lot. And so by the end of 2024, or like late 2024, around October, I would say, I had been having this kind of feeling within that maybe I was ready to come off of the medications I had been on. And one at a time, I came off these medications. And when I came off the final medication, which was the opiate painkiller, so much of me came online. It was just this moment of like connecting all the dots. It just all made sense to me. So it's a much calmer experience.
When you talk about the work that you do, you know, because you said like I put in the work, I'm doing this work, just so that people know, like in case they wanted to do this type of work themselves, is that during a psilocybin experience or is that like a different time or like can you describe like that experience for you?
With the psilocybin, it would take me there. Just by recognizing what was happening, by bypassing the dissociation and connecting with the repressed emotions, eventually I learned to recognize that was me connecting with parts of myself. So, yes, I was meeting these parts of myself while using the medicine, we could say. However, I no longer use it. I no longer require it because what I realized, okay, after that final integration was that I knew how to do this work. I knew how to do it. And so that was the next step for me was teaching myself that I didn't need to continue to rely on this psilocybin to do this work. It's not a requirement. We can learn to do these things, but it was a really useful tool. And for somebody who had an extraordinary amount of trauma and an extraordinary amount of dissociation, That's what it took for me.
One thing I do want to note so that people know is that psilocybin is starting to become legalized in some states.
Yeah, or at the very least decriminalized.
Decriminalized. So it's legal for supervised medical or therapeutic use since
It's
2023.
amazing. And also, I really want to put out there the plant medicine by itself is not enough. We have to be doing the work within the self. When we are using things that expand our conscious awareness, that open our mind up, that expand our sensory perception, if we are just relying on that to do the work for us and we are not doing the actual inner work within the self, and that's work in between sessions, okay? Because it wasn't just in the moments of using the medicine. Okay, it was the work I was doing in between, the way I was showing up for myself, the way I was choosing differently for myself, the way I was getting better at setting boundaries and enforcing my boundaries and choosing loving things for myself, okay? It's all the things we're doing as well. If we're just relying on the plant medicine, we can set ourselves up to experience more psychological confusion and distress. I have met people who have relied only on the plant medicine and have ended up in psychosis. And so this isn't to like scare anybody, just to acknowledge that there can be consequences to these things. I always used this with great regard for how powerful a tool it is. I just want to put that out there that when we're interacting with these things, we need to be really mindful and we need to be doing the work within the self and we can't just rely on it by itself.
Where you're at now, you're a year ago fully integrated, feeling this enlightenment yourself. Is it gone forever? Like, what are your thoughts here? Like, is this just constant work? Like, why did it come back for me? Did I not do it the right way? Or, like, what are your thoughts here?
Trauma is deep and complex. Fear grows exponentially. It exponentially replicates itself. And so, but healing is a journey, and we've experienced so much here that we're just, it takes time to become aware of it all. I always say, like, we got nothing to lose by choosing ourselves, but it's been a really amazing journey. I mean, it's something that I never knew was possible. The therapist I mentioned, who was the one that held space for me while I was figuring out if I was autistic, also, it turns out she found out later she was autistic.
Oh, wow. What do you know?
Yeah. I don't even remember fully the context of it, but she had said to me that she believed people could heal their nervous system. Like it was some view that she had that like, maybe some things aren't really forever or as forever as they seem. Because we hear things about how like personality disorders are forever. Certain trauma disorders are forever or things like this. When that's your only experience for your whole life, you know what I mean? Like the arc of expectation starts to wane. You know what I mean? Like there comes a point where you think, okay, well, this is just how it is. When I tell you, like God plants seeds that allowed me to like have something to hold on to, we could just heal the world, like Michael Jackson said, make it a better place. Anyways, thanks.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and sharing your perspective. So honored that you did. And you have one more follower to your 11,000
You're
followers.
so sweet. Yay. Well, yeah, I look forward to staying in touch.
Stories like this are important because they challenge the idea that recovery has to look one specific way. Everybody's path is different, and sometimes the answers come from places we don't expect. If you're watching this and you're struggling, it probably feels like you're going to be stuck in this forever. But just know that progress is possible. It might just not look like what you expected. Thank you for watching Real Human Stories, helping people see what's possible in mental health.